Come time for the tourney, and Aerys makes a surprise appearance, destroying any possibility of holding the council against him. Aerys had been informed by Varys, but this was not yet widespread knowledge. In the lists, a mystery knight entered and routed all his opponents. At the disappearance of this Knight of the Laughing Tree, Aerys became more paranoid and sent people, including his son, away from the games to hunt down this treasonous knight. Rhaegar did as he was told and searched the area. The speculation is that he came upon a person, alone, clumsily struggling into ill-fitting armor with the shield leaning up against a tree. It was a young Lyanna Stark. When she saw him standing there in shock, she asked, "Are you going to help me, or are you just going to stand there? My squire buggered off." Rhaegar asked her if she really rode in the joust the day before, or if she had just happened upon the armor in the woods. She challenged him to find out later in the next list. Her bravery made him smile. He told Lyanna that it was no longer a good idea for the Knight of the Laughing Tree to show his face. Aerys, his father, became overly suspicious and wanted to punish the knight for treason. He told her he was sent for just that purpose. Lyanna asked what he planned to do. Rhaegar told her that he wouldn't turn her in if she gave him her name. She gave it to him with her story of why she entered the games. As she removed the armor, she bared her heart about her love of riding and sneaking swordplay with her brothers. She opened up about her betrothal and how she knew that for the rest of her life she would be required to watch her husband whore around and revel while she was forced to act a lady and pump out his brood. Rhaegar had been monitoring the lords and had noticed how Robert caroused around the tents of a night. He in turn told Lyanna about how he felt about his father and his plan to call a council before Aerys showed up. She made some clever, cutting observations about strategy and people. He acknowledged what she said and asked for more of her opinions, especially about the North, and he really listened to her. A deep respect grew between the two. Presently, he took the shield to bring back to his father and saw to it that she was safely secreted back to the grounds with the armor. Back at his tent that night, he told Elliot what had happened. Elliot observed that if they were in Dorne, Lyanna would not have had to hide her identity. Girls could do what they wanted back home. Her brother, Oberyn, insisted that any girl he fathered, and he already had 3, would be raised to fight in the ways that their abilities dictated. He would not have any of these silly, decorative Westerosi maidens. Rhaegar decided that he would find a way to honor the feisty jouster in the only way a woman in Westeros was allowed. She would never get a chance to get the honor she deserved for her tourney skills by the rules of Westerosi high society. Rhaegar crowned Lyanna the Queen of Love and Beauty. Nowhere else in the books is this act looked at in such an extreme way, likened to a marriage proposal when it is barely a friendship bracelet. Robert laughed at Rhaegar, but felt the sting that he had not been the champion of the tourney to bestow the crown on the woman he desired, Lyanna. Robert had been jesting with Jon and old Lord Hunter as the prince circled the field after unhorsing Sir Barristan in the final tilt to claim the champion's crown. Ned remembered the moment when all the smiles died. When Prince Rhaegar Targaryen urged his horse past his own wife, the Dornish princess Elia Martell, to lay the Queen of Beauty's laurel in Lyanna's lap. He could see it still, a crown of winter roses, blue as frost. Yes, but who was Ned referring to by all the smiles? Everyone at the tourney, or just his surrounding family and Robert? Brandon practically had to be restrained. Did he force the Knight of the Laughing Tree story from Benjen when he caught the boy returning the borrowed armor? Did he think that Lyanna had sex with Rhaegar in the woods? That's what he himself would have done in that situation. Did Brandon see this as a slight to his family? No one would have told Ned, Robert's bestie, for fear of endangering the betrothal and having Robert expose Lyanna to Aerys in anger. Did Brandon see it as a slight against himself? This handsome prince who unseated him, dishonoring his sister. Did he see it as endangering Lyanna? Elia would have known Rhaegar's personality and not been offended. Knowing the story, she would understand the cryptic symbol and the possible danger to Lyanna. And when the triumphant Prince of Dragonstone named Lyanna Stark, daughter of the Lord of Winterfell, the Queen of Love and Beauty, placing a garland of blue roses in her lap with the tip of his lance, the Lickspittle lords gathered around the king declared that further proof of his perfidy. Why would the prince have thus given an insult to his own wife, the Princess Elia Martell of Dorne, who was present, unless it was to help him gain the Iron Throne? The crowning of the Stark girl, who was by all reports a wild and boyish young thing with none of the Princess Elia's delicate beauty, could only have been meant to win the allegiance of Winterfell to Prince Rhaegar's cause, Simon Staunton suggested to the king. All this would have been forgotten, however, if Rhaegar had never seen Lyanna again. This was the most likely scenario. They made no plans to keep in contact. Hindsight, Robert's false narrative, and enmity from Aerys' allies hung much more significance on this moment. The tourney aftermath. When he returned to Dragonstone, Rhaegar welcomed his new son Aegon. Elia had a difficult birth and was told by the maesters that another child would kill her. Hearing that, Elia and Rhaegar went over their options. She agreed with Rhaegar that he needed to fulfill the prophecy. She was from Dorne. They were not as puritanical about marriage and bastards where she came from. He needed to find a different mother for his last child. They were not in love, so this was no slight to her. She got him to agree that she would stay married to him and retain the protection of the Targaryen name. Her children would come first in the succession before any others. He already decided he would attempt to dissolve male preference in the succession after he became king, so Rhaenys could be officially in line as well as her brother. As it stood, however, he knew he would have to marry again to properly legitimize the next child after what happened with Aegon the Unworthy. Elia was fine with whatever else he chose as long as she and the children were put first and protected. He set out with his companions on a prince's progress, ostensibly to honor the little Aegon, but his true plan was to curry the support he was thwarted from getting at the tourney. Lyanna had returned to Winterfell with her brothers Brandon and Benjen. Ned went on to the Vale with Robert. Her brothers would not have run off and left her to travel alone. She arrived home and heard the gossip about the wedding of Brandon and Catelyn. She talked her father into letting her stay home. She wanted to avoid being ambushed to marry Robert if he were to show up. She and Benjen had played together in the passages of Winterfell as children. Before Brandon and Rhaegar left, she was moving through a tunnel where through the wall vents she overheard a conversation between Brandon, her father, and Maester Wallace. They were talking about how the Southern Lords were planning to use the marriages to unify and confront Aerys when the time came. She agreed with this part. Rhaegar had conceded that something needed to be done about him. They spoke of Harrenhal and how now that everyone had seen his insanity up close, the time was ripe to depose Aerys. They also agreed that after that Queen of Love and Beauty fiasco, they should send for Robert to meet them and to get the wedding plans with Lyanna moving before he changed his mind. The day I learned that Brandon was to marry Catelyn Tully, there was nothing sweet about that pain. He never wanted her, I promise you that. He told me so on our last night together. But Rickard Stark had great ambitions too, Southron ambitions, that would not be served by having his heir marry the daughter of one of his own vassals. Then Brandon wanted to know what they were going to do about Rhaegar, the heir, and his son. The maester spat and called him Dragonspawn and said that when all the Southern Lords get together, all the Targaryens must be routed. It might be an even better idea to take out Rhaegar quietly first. Brandon was a fierce fighter and volunteered to kill the bastard that unhorsed him. Being a competent commander and well-liked among the northern forces, he could lead a guerrilla group to take out the prince if need be. Rhaegar was often seen on a royal progress with his men. It was rumored that he was going on one now to celebrate the birth of his son. He would travel castle to keep to drum up support. Brandon would marry and bed Catelyn, Lyanna would marry Robert, Ned and Ashara. Then, when they were all ready, gather a small force to ambush the prince and begin the coup. The new heir would be moments old and would be no problem to dispatch as well. Horrified, Lyanna heard her father agree that the Targaryens were all crazy by blood and needed to go. When he got back from the Riverlands, they would finish the plans for Lyanna's wedding and the betrothals of both Ned and Benjen. He would sit down and write a letter to the Danes about Ashara for Ned. Lyanna's blood ran cold. They were wrong about Rhaegar. She felt the need to do something to save the prince, who understood her as the Knight of the Laughing Tree. Her competitive brother Brandon had lost to Rhaegar at Harrenhal, so she may have wanted to save his life as well. She knew that Rhaegar had crowned her the Queen of Love and Beauty because she would be spending the rest of her life being underestimated. Yes, Rhaegar was beautiful, but more importantly, he saw her. From her conversation with him, she knew that he was completely unlike his father and would make a just and honorable king. She went to Benjen and spoke of what she heard. He cautioned her and calmed her wolf's blood for a short while. Brandon and Rickard left for River Run. However, when the steward sent the seamstress into her room to take measurements for her wedding dress, she lost it. That night, she set out for King's Landing to talk to the prince. She was often referred to as half a horse, and she often went out for long rides. It would be days before anyone noticed her missing. She nearly caught up with her father's party on the road south, but reached the crossroads after them.